dinosaurs and Raquel Welch in a fur bikini, lost civilizations, mythical quests, giant creatures, all decades before CGI. And a lot of it still holds up today. A lot of it courtesy of one man, Ray Harryhausen. So let's start with the one he himself considered his best, Jason and the Argonauts. The story follows Jason, the surviving son of King Aristo, whose father was killed when King Peleus invaded Thessaly. Years later, Jason sets out to reclaim his father's throne. With help from the goddess Hera, Jason builds the Argo, gathers a crew, and sails to Colchis in search of the Golden Fleece. The film was directed by Don Chaffee, with Ray Harryhausen handling the stop-motion animation, and by this point, Harryhausen had already made his name with 1950s monster movies, and then with the huge success of The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. But back to Jason and the Argonauts. I would not say it is unbelievably brilliant as writing or direction, but when it comes to Harryhausen's practical effects, the film still works, almost like you are seeing these creatures for the first time. The sequence with the giant bronze Talos is still one of the great ones. The Hydra is memorable too, but the real peak comes after that, when Jason faces the skeleton warriors grown from the Hydra's teeth. The choreography is still incredible, and the skeletons feel genuinely vicious, especially in that close-up of the grinning skull with a bloody sword. That's real movie magic. Next up, Mysterious Island. This is Harryhausen on effects again. The film is based on Jules Verne's 1875 novel, which was a sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The book is mostly a desert island adventure, with Captain Nemo and his submarine appearing in the later chapters. Mysterious Island had been filmed before, and it would be adapted many more times later. But for me, this 1961 version is still the one. The story begins in 1865, during the American Civil War. Captured Union soldiers escape in a hot air balloon, get caught in a storm, and wash up on a desert island. They build shelter, try to survive, and are later joined by two shipwrecked Englishwomen. And then the film brings in the giant creatures, a giant bird, giant bees, and of course, the giant crab. So yes, the film moves away from the book, but at least there's a lot of fun in that. And about that crab, Harryhausen took it seriously. He bought real crabs for the production and had one dissected at the British Museum so he could get the anatomy right for the animation. The balloon sequence also deserves a mention. It's a genuinely exciting scene, all scored beautifully by Bernard Herrmann. After the Italian-made Hercules became a huge hit in America in 1959, thanks in large part to Joseph E. Levine's massive promotional campaign, Italy responded with a whole wave of muscle man adventures. A lot of them can be pretty dull, but Hercules in the Haunted World is the one I'd single out. The film was directed by Mario Bava, just 1 year after his directorial debut with Black Sunday. Reg Park stars as Hercules, who returns home and finds his lover Deianira under the influence of King Lico, played by Christopher Lee. To save her, Hercules has to enter the shadows of Hades and retrieve the Stone of Forgetfulness, which can restore her mind. He's joined by Theseus and the comic sidekick Telemachus. At times, it feels closer to horror than to a regular sword and sandal adventure. And you can already see Bava's love for dreamlike lighting, and the sets do a lot of the work here. Caves, palaces, pits of boiling lava, and even zombies all come alive through practical effects and visual ideas. Let's stay in myth for a little longer, but move into George Pal territory with Atlantis, the Lost Continent. By the early 1960s, Pal had already had major success with effects-driven films like Destination Moon, The War of the Worlds, and The Time Machine. With Atlantis, he was clearly building another large-scale spectacle, this time around a lost civilization. The story follows Demetrios, a Greek sailor who rescues Antilia, a princess of Atlantis. He follows her back to her homeland, but instead of finding riches, he's made a slave. To win his freedom and get back to Antilia, Demetrios has to fight in the arena and stop the king's war minister Zarin from starting a war with the outside world. The film isn't exactly strong on character or dialogue, but the spectacle is the point. Atlantis comes with fish-shaped submarines, deadly ray weapons, huge sets, and even scenes where slaves are turned into animal hybrids. It also cuts a few budgetary corners, including borrowed footage of the volcanic eruption from Quo Vadis. But for this kind of early 60s fantasy adventure, that almost feels appropriate. Next, we have The Magic Sword, a flawed but very charming film from Burt Gordon. Gordon is often treated as one of the worst directors of his era, and his films don't exactly have the best reputation, but this is one I'd actually recommend. The story follows George, the foster son of the sorceress Sybil. Using his mother's magic, he sees Princess Helene from afar and falls in love with her. Then he sees her abducted by the sorcerer Lodak. The king announces that whoever rescues Helene can marry her, so George defies Sybil and sets off on the quest. He also awakens 6 enchanted knights, and they join him on the journey. To reach Helene, they have to survive the 7 curses that Lodak has placed in their path. The film still has plenty of extra fantasy business: ogres, beast transformations, and all kinds of magical obstacles. Not all of the magic really takes flight, but it's still quite entertaining to watch, and the dragon effects at the climax are actually pretty good. So, let's save another princess, this time in Jack the Giant Killer. The story begins when the exiled sorcerer Pendragon gives Princess Elaine a music box with a tiny figure inside. That figure turns into a giant and abducts her. Jack, a farm boy, kills the giant, and he's then sent to take Elaine to safety in France. But Pendragon abducts her again, turns her into a witch, and Jack has to rescue her from his castle. It was clearly made with the 7th voyage of Sinbad in mind, and it even brings back Nathan Duran as director, Kerwin Matthews as the hero, and Torrin Thatcher as the villain. Not everything here works perfectly, but Jack the Giant Killer still has enough strange fantasy charm to make it worth it. I saved 2 more Harryhausen films for the end. The first is 1,000,000 Years B.C., but before we praise the dinosaurs, Raquel Welch deserves her moment. The image of her in that fur bikini became one of the most iconic in film history. It helped turn Welch into a global star, and 1,000,000 Years B.C. became one of Hammer's most profitable films, taking in more than $9 million internationally. The plot follows Tumak, the son of the Rock Tribe's chief. After a fight over food, Tumak falls from a cliff and is forced to survive on his own. He's later found by Loana of the Shell Tribe, whose people are more advanced than his own. But after Tumak is driven out again, he and Loana have to survive together in the wilderness, while Tumak's jealous brother takes over the Rock Tribe. And that survival story is really just the frame for the main event, Harryhausen's dinosaurs. He spent 9 months in post-production creating the stop-motion dinosaurs and other creatures, including a giant turtle. The film also throws in real creatures, including a tarantula. For the time, this was jaw-dropping work, and for many viewers, this kind of dinosaur spectacle wouldn't really be replaced until Jurassic Park arrived 26 years later. So whether you're here for Harryhausen's effects or Raquel Welch's outfit, 1,000,000 Years B.C. is one you absolutely have to see. And the last film for today is The Valley of Gwangi. Tuck Kirby, played by James Franciscus, comes back into the life of T.J. Breckenridge, who runs a struggling Wild West show. She has one thing that could make the show a sensation: a tiny, prehistoric horse. When they realize the animal may have come from a hidden valley in Mexico, Tuck decides to follow it back and see what else is living there. The idea originally came from Willis O'Brien, the special effects man behind King Kong. He had been working on it for years, but died before he could get it made. O'Brien was also one of the people who inspired Ray Harryhausen, so there is something very fitting about Harryhausen finally bringing the project to the screen. And this was also the last dinosaur film he animated. Which makes it a little sad that the Valley of Gwangi did so poorly at the box office. By 1969, interest in this kind of monster movie had already faded. It was released with very little promotion and never really found its audience. But if you like Harryhausen's other films, or if you like King Kong-style monster movies, this one is absolutely worth checking out.